Before I start this video, I completely stole this idea from Carson Runcorst. Now enjoy the rest of the video. My goal for 2024 is to watch 500 new movies, which means I have to watch around 42 a month. This month, I watched a total of 36. So I'm pretty much a fucking failure. To start off the year, I didn't even watch a movie, but instead I watched a short film called Never Forget About It. As someone who loved The Sopranos and as someone who has an insane hyperfixation on 9/11, this piqued my interest. It's about the dilemma most media companies had to go through after the attacks to either choose to keep the towers up in their piece of media as a tribute or to replace them to avoid negative thoughts and post-trauma. I thought it was interesting how much of a lighter approach it took to the situation and kind of joked about genuine arguments being made, but it was a good concept, and as I watched The Sopranos a few years back, I actually had the same question as I watched the intro going into the new season. My first real movie of the year was Maestro, directed by Bradley Cooper. It was pretty visually stunning and had a ton of great performances, but it was kind of a nothing burger of a movie because of how boring the writing and story was. I do think that Bradley Cooper has a bright future in directing, but if this wins an Oscar, we will riot. I then watched Eileen, which was kind of just an annoying movie. Like, I know what Anne Hathaway was trying to do with this performance. She wanted femcells on Twitter to give her the mother title, but it came off as stale and felt like parody and satire. This also seemed like a complete ripoff of Carol with a extremely similar storyline. I then watched How to Have Sex. Despite the title, this movie does not teach you how to get laid, but it's just 90 minutes of peer pressure, drinking, doing drugs, partying, and the predictable consequences of those actions. I followed that up with Passages, a movie with a plot driven by the following image. I really don't know what people see in this movie because it's just a contrast of gay porn and straight porn, which is really not my thing. I then did an Oscar nomination double feature starting with Godzilla Minus One, which was pretty alright. I can never take a Godzilla-esque monster movie seriously, and it had a really cheesy, predictable storyline, but even though I knew what was coming and I rolled my eyes, I still got chills. I was able to turn off my critical analysis part of my brain and just simply enjoy a movie for its absurdity. I said this in my top 25 films of 2023 video, but I feel like if this wasn't based in Japan, it wouldn't even be a 3.6 average on Letterboxd. Following that up with American Fiction, I was pretty on board with this movie ever since I watched the trailer a couple months ago and thought it had a pretty intelligent way of approaching the portrayal of African American culture in media. Throughout the movie, I was writing a 3.5 to 4-star rating up until the ending. To me, the ending fell flat and left me unsatisfied, and I really wish they didn't try to add a twist or anything. I really thought, like, damn, really? That's how you're gonna end the movie? I saw Society of the Snow on the trending page of Letterboxd with a 4.1 average and available on Netflix, and I got excited about it. But after I got done watching it, I just felt okay about it and thought there wasn't anything special about it. I then thought my brain was fried and I was watching too many critically acclaimed movies and wasn't liking them because I was unable to appreciate them and differentiate them from actual bad movies. So I decided to watch the entire Fast and Furious franchise. I'm not gonna get into it at all because it really doesn't have anything noteworthy to say about it, but here are my rankings of the franchise. I then went to a 10:30 p.m. showing of Mean Girls, my first watch 2024 release. Apparently 25% of the audience didn't know it was a musical. My ass was not aware either. I walked into that movie 18 years old and left 19 years old. I spent the beginning of my birthday watching that movie. I think I recorded a review after I left the theater, so I'll play that right now. Just got done watching, I think, the first 2024 release. Mean Girls. That shit was ass. I then forced myself to watch another January movie release, ISS, a movie which plot intrigued me. What would happen on the International Space Station, a partnership between USA and Russia, if the countries nuked each other? How would they react to that act of war? For being a January release, it did exceed my expectations, but then again, it's still a January release, and there was never a shred of hope from the start. I was finally able to find an open theater showing for The Zone of Interest, which was supposed to be available to watch in December 15th of 2023, but I finally got a theater 30 miles away from me on January 21st. What is there to say about this movie? To start, it felt like the average shot length of the movie was 45 seconds, and when you watch this, you'll understand what I mean by that. I think the desired effect is we're supposed to feel immersed in the concentration camp in real time as if we were really there. I think it achieved that really well. The reason I only gave it 3 stars is because there wasn't really a plot. I think they were shooting for an eeriness feeling, but that was kind of lost. The storyline, or lack thereof, was kind of irrelevant, but I think it's an important film to watch. I don't really know how historically accurate it is in a visual sense, but if it is, then I think it should be played in World War II museums. I finally got around to watching Her, and man, was this a rough watch. It had great visuals and the best performance of Joaquin Phoenix's career. It has a great soundtrack, and it's really easy to understand why people love this movie. Sadly, you can see how the scenario can play out in the future, which makes the science fiction aspect of the movie that much more immersive. And I really hope it's not that easy for an AI voiced by Scarlett Johansson to manipulate humans. Actually, never mind. That will definitely happen. Then I watched Self-Reliance. Then I watched Isle of the Dogs, and I have the same opinion as I do all Wes Anderson movies, which is it's a cute, charming, quirky movie, but it doesn't do it for me. His comedy isn't really funny. You don't really see people laughing out loud to his movies, but it's just a strong exhale through the nose. His strengths are his visual style, and even though I can acknowledge them as beautiful, there's just something so dull and boring about his movies that I can't put my finger on. But if you do love this movie, along with all of his other movies, I don't blame you because I can see why. I then chose that I didn't want to be happy for the rest of the week, so I watched Marriage Story. I feel like I'm too young to truly appreciate this movie, but just thinking about how 50% of marriages end in divorce and the real aspects of how divorce court plays out actually scare me. To think there are millions of stories just like this, not played up for Hollywood dramatic effect, but instead a real-life, normalized tragedy of the deterioration of a perceived soulmate connection is just too scary to think about. As a big fan of good horror, I was excited for Black Christmas, but it just seemed like another copy and paste of every slasher I've ever seen. Maybe this was the original of those copy and pasted movies, and it's unfair for me to criticize this movie like that, but the call is coming from inside the house didn't hit me, and to me, it wasn't scary, and the only silver lining was it had Olivia Hussey, also known as Juliet from Romeo and Juliet, who was every freshman English student's crush. So there's that. I then got around to watching Black Swan, and I thought it was a pretty great movie. Natalie Portman won the Oscar for Best Actress in a Leading Role, pretty deservingly so. The contrast of innocent and pure to sinful and manipulative was great. All that being said, I didn't give it a higher rating because I thought it tried to be too complicated and convoluted than it needed to be. I then decided to start getting through the rom-com genre, starting with what some consider the peak of this genre, Pretty Woman. To me, it was just alright and nothing special. They tried to make the guy as charming as possible. Maybe delusional men like this movie because of the I can fix her aspect. But trust me guys, don't save her. She does not want to be saved. Alright? And then girls like this because of how charming the guy is. I'm not sure. That's just what I think people like about this movie. I bought a ticket to go see Night Swim, and then I realized I did not want to do that after I saw the 1.9 average on Letterboxd, so I just waited for it to get released on digital. I was pretty excited for this movie just from the concept alone. As a kid, I was always afraid of swimming in the pool alone, let alone at dark, and I thought it was going to channel some of the horror aspects from the pool scenes in season 1 of Stranger Things. But that's kind of the complete opposite approach it took. It decided to take a haunted spirit approach with a haunted pool, which was just way too lame. I also bought a ticket for Aquaman back in December as a double feature to the movie Migration. But after I fell asleep to Migration, I just couldn't pull myself to pretend to be attentive during Aquaman. So I finally got around to watching it, and man, I couldn't take it. I couldn't handle it. Watching a $200 million budget getting burned and funneled into nothing must be so painful to small budget filmmakers. This is the last movie of the DCEU era, so I guess we can just rejoice in that fact. My dad then begged me to watch a good movie and recommended After Hours, which was decently interesting. I didn't pick up on the fact that it was a comedy until it was a little late in the movie. A Scorsese comedy is kind of off-putting, and to me it's kind of the same feeling of watching a Kubrick's comedy Dr. Strangelove. Such an esteemed director going into rare, uncharted territories is kind of peculiar. But yeah, it's easy to see how this is considered a classic. This movie was like a lost Curb Your Enthusiasm episode. Then I watched Call Me By Your Name, which is a 2017 movie set in 1980s Italy, shot in 35mm film, and it was surprisingly not as pretentious and artsy as I thought it was going to be. I just couldn't get past the age gap in the characters' romance, but I think Timothée Chalamet's exploration of manhood was uncomfortably accurate and a great depiction of what it's really like. Then I watched the NFL playoffs between my Lions and the 49ers, and after they got embarrassed, I decided to cheer myself up with some Detroit pride by watching 8 Mile, and that really seemed to do the trick to help me get over the Lions' loss. Then I watched my 14th 2020 release, Shiva Baby, which is an oddly length movie, especially for such a new release, but it felt way longer than it was just because of how fucking stressful the entire thing was. I hope Rachel Seno continues to create unique comedies like this one and Bottoms. It'll be interesting to see the rest of her career play out. I think in the coming years, she's really going to hit a home run and cement herself as one of the best comedic actresses of our generation. I was pretty iffy on the genre of rom-coms until I watched Bridget Jones's Diary. Now I'm sure I completely fucking hate this genre. The only redeeming part of this movie is Renee Zellweger in a Playboy bunny outfit, and the speech Colin Firth gave about how she liked Bridget just the way she was. Also, the actual funniest part of the movie is how the audience is supposed to go along with the fact that Renee Zellweger is supposed to be a fat, ugly, unlovable woman in this movie. Finish off the month, I finally got around to watching Captain Marvel. This now leaves Eternals and Thor: The Dark World as the only Marvel movies I've yet to see. I was gonna watch this back in 2019, but after the media outrage about how much of a feminist woke disaster this was supposed to be, it completely turned me off of it. And yeah, there are some lines in the movie that make me roll my eyes, but if you can just get past that, it's a pretty decent overall action flick. So yeah, that's all I watched in January, and I'm starting to realize that I'm a pretty hateful and critical person when it comes to movies. I really wish I was able to simply enjoy a movie without being so negative about it. But yeah, that's all I watched, and I'll see you guys in February.